And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Richmond Crime Prevention Group Neighborhood Roundtable. We are doing this thing online with the pandemic, where we are meeting once a month on topics like we would normally do if we were meeting in person, and sharing information about things that neighbors really want to know about, and connecting with the police department. And so one of the topics that we have received a lot of feedback about has been traffic, how traffic's enforced, what's our capacity at RPD, how we deal with traffic issues like donuts, speeding, people not, obeying stop signs, thinking that they're suggested. We get a lot of calls and concerns about that. And so we have here today with us Sergeant Decious, who is with our traffic division. And he's going to talk to us a little bit and give us a little bit of an overview about the unit and what the unit does. And then what I'll do is some of you all sent in questions ahead of time. So we're going to try to get to some of your questions. And then we'll try to take some questions from you guys who are in the group as well. The only thing I ask is that, once I start taking questions from the group, if you all can just push the raise hand button, that way I can call on you. And then you can unmute yourself once I call on you, so I can take your question and then mute yourself again so you can hear your question offline. That's clear. Thank you so much. And I turn it over to Sergeant Decious.
Good afternoon, everyone. Apologize about the halo above my head. That's just one of the lights. And a little bit about myself. I'm Donovan Decious. I've been a sworn officer here in Richmond for a little over 15 years. And I started in an agency called Mountain View back in about 2000. So I'm in my 20th year of law enforcement. Just throughout my time here, I've been fortunate to work up investigations in a DV unit and the sex assault, and then the gang unit as well. And I recently took over the traffic unit in January of this year. So it's a learning process for me, and there's things that I'm going through growing pains, and I don't have all of the answers. And I'll let you guys know that up front, that if I don't have answers today, I'll be more than happy to find them out and let you guys know what they are in the future. That being said, what is the traffic unit? What do we do? Kind of what's our main core principles and our the fundamentals as to how we operate. The traffic unit usually is consisted of a sergeant and then motor officers, who are the ones who are riding the motorcycles. We use motorcycles as the CHP and other agencies because they are quick to maneuver and easier to actually go in and out of traffic, catch up to people, and just maneuver in tight areas for better enforcement. Unfortunately, right now, I'm one that rides a motor, as well as one other officer. We just lost an officer. I'll say lost one. He got promoted to the rank of sergeant last week, so good for him. He was a motor officer, and he's now working the weekend graveyard teams. So we have two officers, myself and Officer McKinney, who ride motors. We have a DUI, primarily a DUI car, which works Tuesday through Friday evenings, who is responsible for taking crashes and then primarily investigating DUIs. And then we have a commercial officer who primarily, or one of his roles is to enforce, commercial vehicles, whether it be the big 18-wheelers that go up and down Cutting if they're not supposed to, that go up and down Carlson or the Parkway. So we tend to focus on that when we have time. And then we have one officer who's unfortunately on injury leave right now. So we're a little bit short-staffed. We have 3 officers and myself that actually work. So what are our core things that we work and that we actually do is we respond to traffic accidents. If it's just a property damage or just a car crash where there's no significant injury, we'll respond. We don't always take the report, but we a lot of times will respond. If it becomes a significant injury, then that's where we kind of do the investigation. The officers in the unit have a little bit higher training, level of training, advanced classes, reconstruction. There's a basic and intermediate and advanced class, which these guys have actually gone to, so they will take those investigations. We also, you know, what this is going to be discussed today is about traffic enforcement, and that's kind of what our bread and butter is. We unfortunately can't do as much as what we want to given our staffing right now, but we're doing the best we can. So how do we go out and we do enforcement? Just this week, I've been in contact with Lieutenant Stonebreaker, and we're trying to get on social media and solicit places of concern, areas that we have the highest accident rates, complaints from the community, the citizens, and we're trying to solicit information on a 2-week basis, and then we're trying to go out as the actual unit to target those areas or to enforce those areas, and then bring back every week or two what the results were, how many tickets we got, just so we kind of have a give and take relationship with the community, so the stakeholders feel as though they're actually helping us perform our job. We also work a lot of operations targeting DUI enforcement. We have grants with the Office of Traffic Safety where we focus on the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. We enforce areas areas and violations which are our primary collision factor, and what that is it's the primary vehicular offense or vehicle code offense which usually causes the most accidents. So what are those? Speeding, red lights, and stop signs. We do operations targeting specific areas for those kind of violations. And then we do DUI checkpoints. We do 6 a year, or we have been, and that's more or less just trying to keep the community as safe as possible by keeping impaired drivers off the road. So that in a nutshell is kind of what we do. Obviously there's going to be questions for me, and I'll be happy to answer as many as I possibly can. I hope that kind of gives a overall view as to what we do. If it doesn't and you need clarification, please feel free to ask.
So thank you, Sergeant Decious. And so what we're going to do is, because some people sent in questions, we're going to take a couple of questions that people sent in. And then we're going to go to questions from people who are live as well. Some of them are repeats, so I'm not going to go through all of the questions. So hopefully everybody will get their question answered. But the first one comes from Carole, and Carole writes, since the police department's understaffed and has less funding, could civilians be trained to handle some of the less serious, non-violent situations in order to free up patrol for more serious crimes? And she has a part 2 to that question, but let's start with part 1.
So part 1, I know that there's kind of talk about this reimagining police and kind of getting, not law enforcement involved in a lot of these, we'll say non-violent, because that's how it's actually written here, but some of these maybe less hostile situations. In terms of, that's kind of a hard question to go, because it's really shifting away from police work as we are right now into more, social workers, like a social-based aspect. I don't want to, I'll be honest, I don't want to speak too much on that, other than I do know that we have, for like mentally unstable or people that have, say mental disabilities, but emotional distress, we do have, officers that have social workers that go out and they deal with them on a daily basis. So it's not always someone going out in uniform. And the officers that do work that unit kind of tend to dress a little bit less militaristic. But I think that first question is a lot bigger, or it needs to be a bigger dialogue than I think speaking just about traffic instances or a situation. So I'm going to kind of punt that one in a way.
Okay.
But I'm happy to answer the number 2, because that's going to be more addressed towards what I do and what I deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, and there's a second part to Carole's question, which was about donuts. In regards to donuts, can there be a large area designated for kind of legal sideshows or legal places where people can do donuts to relieve stress, especially during the pandemic? Do you know that there is any area that is set up like that? And is that something that the city's considering currently?
So is the city considering it at this point in time? I don't think so. In terms of, is there a place where we could do something like that? Well, for people that want to race cars, you have Sears Point, you have places down in the Carmel Valley or Monterey, or up in Napa, that they are controlled environments where there's insurance, there's emergency personnel, where you're able to actually race on a drag strip, right? To have a big parking lot in a city, there would have to be a lot of things which would need to be set up, and you would have to have, I would say, emergency personnel, some sort of insurance, just because a lot of these individuals that go out and they spin donuts, they spin the tires, they whip these cars around. It's done rather aggressively and rather violently, and if it's not a controlled setting where there's enough distance, enough space, and in case something happens, a tire comes off, somebody gets hit, there's a serious liability aspect for it. So is there a possibility of it? I will never say that there's not. But at this point in time, I would say it's probably more dangerous to even allow it in an open area unless it were in an actual controlled environment. And a lot of the issue that we have with the individuals which are doing these kind of actions are, we have shots fired, at these sideshows. We have people that are driving impaired. So if it were in a place which were a bit more controlled, maybe we could mitigate some of that and eliminate some of it. But at this point in time, I don't see it being feasible at this junction, but I'm not going to say it wouldn't happen in the future.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Carole?
Carole, did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so you know, Carole, yes, so everything here is going to be recorded so that we can share this. People who are not here, or, who would like to hear more of the conversation and weren't able to log on, will definitely have an opportunity to check it out. So yeah, we will definitely send that out.
Yeah.
As we go into the next one, Sergeant Decious, did you want to explain the difference between a sideshow and a donut? Because we're going to have a couple of questions about both of those, and I just want to make sure that people understand the difference between the two.
So if a single vehicle is out by itself and it's just doing doing donuts, so one of the main areas that we have an issue with is down in the dead end of Canal. There are cars parked down there. There's ports. It's a relatively remote area where officers go down there, but it's not one that we're there on a continuous basis or an area. So if one car is down at an intersection or in an abandoned area and they're spinning donuts, they're whipping the car around, in a circle, which is like a donut. So that's spinning donuts. A sideshow is what we have come more accustomed to in Richmond, is where you have anywhere upwards of 100, 200, 300 cars, which are gathering in an area. We had this occur last Friday or Saturday night at Close and Bloom, where there were probably 200 vehicles blocking all ways of the intersection and making it so emergency personnel, police officers, couldn't actually get there. And you have 5 cars in the intersection all spinning donuts and circling together as people are outside of their vehicles filming, cheering them on, whether they're shooting off firecrackers. We actually had reports of shots fired at that actual sideshow. So a sideshow is going to be a bigger production of someone spinning donuts, and it's more or less for the entertainment of everyone who is there watching. And it's a big time hazardous, and it's just a danger for the community and for the people that are participating. You have cars that whip around at such a high rate of speed that the people that are out there, the pedestrians, the onlookers, that they get hit and they sustain serious injuries. So it's definitely a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question comes from, I believe it's Johnwyn and Toby, and they want to talk about stop signs. So since stop signs by many are viewed as a suggestion, so we do know about the Hollywood stop and the suggested stopping. will speed bumps be added to, and this specific area was Garvin Avenue between 23rd and San Pablo, to stop the constant racing, speeding, and donuts, kind of piggybacking onto what we talked about. And then they talk about how unsafe it is for people to do that unsafe speed. So what do we do about areas where there's, you know, a lot of speeding that's going on and traffic calming?
So there's a couple things which can be done. In terms of speed bumps, that's something that we as a police department usually don't get involved in. It's something that the community, the people in the neighborhood can contact the engineering department at City Hall and express what the issues are. They then contact us, and we can go out there and kind of give an analysis as to what we think the problems are, what we think things can actually help. So in terms of getting speed bumps, there's kind of a process for it. It's just the same thing as getting stop signs or roundabouts in certain areas to slow the speed of traffic. You have physical barriers or signs that hopefully help with that. So that's something that the engineering department is primarily in charge of, with the assistance of us. That being said, we do have, I want to say it's 3 electronic signs. They're signboards which can post speed limits, post phrases. It can do all sorts of things, and it can also record data. And that's important because we can place them in certain areas within the community, which we're having issues with speeding, and kind of see when the time frame is on what days as the most prevalent speeders are, the most often and the most egregious. And then we can target our enforcement during those hours to hopefully limit and or educate with warnings or corrective behavior with a citation. And so those are a couple ways of doing it. In terms of stop signs, I would recommend, because I understand that traffic is a major issue in the city of Richmond, and it is with a lot of agencies. And just with the levels we have in terms of the officers working, we're kind of chasing our own tail in a way. We go and we fix one area, we try to rectify it, and then something continually just kind of goes around, and it happens everywhere. But I kind of want to circle back to the social media stuff. Even when Lieutenant Stonebreaker is able to post this question about where it is that you guys or the community wants us to focus our enforcement efforts, please take part in that, because we do get complaints through patrol, and I get emails, I get voicemails, and we try to address those and target those as much as we can. But we don't know all of the answer or all of the areas, and we don't have all the answers for everything. For us, what we try to do is get out there as often as we can throughout the day and enforce them. And if we're sitting at, say, Garvin and 24th, which I think I don't know if it's a 4-way or a 2-way stop sign, we could be there doing enforcement, but 6 blocks down the road, there could be another 4-way stop sign, and the same kind of violations are happening. So it's difficult, but it's not something that we're blind to, and it's not something that we're not trying to solve. We are. I know it's frustrating, so I'm sorry about that. But
Thank you for that question. I'm going to keep on going because I want to answer as many questions as I want to, and I'm going to pull a couple more out of the questions that were sent in, and then I'm going to take some questions from you guys who are in the chat as well. Please be aware that the list of everything that you sent in has been sent to the traffic unit, so all the areas of concern. If your question doesn't get read, don't feel like we don't have it. We have it. We got all your areas of concern that you wrote in about, and we will definitely work to try to get back with everybody on their particular issue. So if I don't read your question, just know that we have all that and we will be responding to it. So this question is from Jaime. Jaime says, I live on North Shore Drive. There are a number of vehicles that don't move from the same spot for days, even weeks on end. Are the parking time limitations suspended during pandemic? This is a great question. And if not, I respectfully suggest that they enforce them. So go ahead.
So first of all, I saw that Mandy actually kind of responded in the chat to this. The parking time restrictions have not been suspended. We did for a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic with COVID-19, not suspend them, but we made it basically about a 10-day period just because people weren't working and they weren't moving their cars quite as often. So we were trying to be as lenient as possible without, upsetting the people in the community. That being said, we're back to the 72-hour. And I think Mandy actually referenced the phone number there for the abandoned vehicle hotline of it's 510-620-6644. And that gets checked every day. And our parking enforcement personnel, and unfortunately with this is there's almost there can be up to a 2-week lag period because of the amount of phone calls that we get. And with now we have 3 parking enforcement personnel because one is starting the police academy, I think in about a week. There's only a certain amount of the parking enforcement personnel which can go and actually red tag and or tow these vehicles. So for Jaime, Mr. Perez, excuse me, my radio, for Mr. Perez is if you have these cars or these vehicles which are sitting there for a prolonged period of time, please call the 6644 number and we'll get out there as soon as we can. But other than that, we don't always know if a car has been sitting there for more than 3 days unless somebody calls and then we red tag it and then it's there after the 72 hours after it's been chalked, the wheels chalked and the actual odometer checked as well. But to answer your question, we didn't suspend anything. We prolonged it for a little bit and now it's back down to the 72. But on a side note, so everyone knows, street sweeping citations, those are going to be back into effect on October 1st. We did post something on social media. So we are starting to enforce the street sweeping on October 1, which I believe is next Thursday, a week from tomorrow. So just a heads up.
Mm-hmm. And Jaime, because I know you're on the line, did that answer your question?
Partly because actually, I have to say I've never used the phone line. Maybe I should do that. I've been using the app and providing lots of details there. Is that, I mean, do you look at the app as much as you take?
Yes. Yeah, the app is just as good. I don't know why it hasn't been tagged or hasn't been moved, or if it's just because we're inundated with so many vehicles. But I would say overkill. I would do both just to make sure that it actually gets through. So my office, my cubicle, it's directly next door to where the parking enforcement is. And I hear those messages on a daily basis coming in and then them kind of divvying out as to based on their respective areas as to where they work, when they're going to go handle them. And like I said, it can take up to 2 weeks for some of these cars to actually be red tagged and or towed just because of the amount. But I'm not going to say that every once in a while some cars don't fall through the cracks. No one's perfect, but if they've been there for days, even weeks on end, and I'm not sure when you actually reported them, but and I can give you my email and you can email me what the cars are. Okay.
I'd rather use the app, and then much worse than North Shore, of course, is Riding Road by Point Isabel, because there.
Oh yes.
I mean
that is.
That's a different story. Yeah.
I know.
That's a monster.
What is the story?
Well, if you guys would like to know the story, that actually has to do with homelessness. So most of the people at Ride-In are homeless. And because I am also, in addition to crime prevention manager, the liaison to the city's homeless task force, we have been working on Ride-In. We're currently working on an effort to limit the amount of parking that's there, but under the county ordinance for shelter in place, the county has basically given some direction not to abate homeless encampments, and that includes vehicle encampments, unless it's for health and safety, which Ride-In now qualifies under health and safety. And the reason why is this: there are not enough beds for people right now. They had to close down all the shelters. I don't know if people know that. And so they moved people to hotels. The hotels were paid for through the state. And so funding came to move people from the shelters and from encampments to the state. Well, there's a priority system where they take people who are elderly and disabled first, And now the hotels countywide, not just in Richmond, are 98% full. So that means people don't have a place to go. And normally when we did an abatement, we tried to offer people resources, you know, tried to get them into shelter before we move them. Now we really don't have the ability to do that. So that's the reason why those cars are parked there. But we have done some effort to try to get rid of some of the abandoned vehicles that we identified with a community-based organization, that nobody was actually living in those vehicles, because you do have a lot of people living in their vehicles now. And we were able to get those vehicles towed and removed. There's going to be something probably taken to City Council, I believe, sometime next month, about limiting the number of vehicles that are located at Ryden. And the city is looking into a place where we can establish a safe parking program. So if anybody's interested in that, you know, Mandy, maybe you can put, the email to RPD community in there. And I can also invite you guys to the city's homeless task force, and you can hear more updates about Ryden. But that's the reason why there's so many cars and vehicles and RVs parked on Ryden, not just Ryden, but Castro and other places. And all cities are trying to figure out how to deal with it. So.
You said it much better than I could. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And I know people see all those cars parked there and saying, what is going on? The trash and other things like that. It's a very challenging issue, but we all have to work together to address it, because, you know, we're in the pandemic, and, you know, we've got to be able to figure it out. So I want to get to a couple more questions. I know we're almost at halftime, and then I want to open it up. So this question comes from Cherie. Cherie's like, well, why doesn't an officer park on any street that has a four-way stop in Richmond and just start giving people tickets? The city would make enough money to subsidize traffic officers. So, Sergeant Decious, you want to respond to that?
So we actually do that quite often. An intersection with signal lights or a stop sign. So one of the most habitually, offensive, or someone that an intersection which happens to have a lot of offenses for traffic is 37th and Barrett. I know that there's a question here about speeders on Barrett as well, in between, say, the Avenue and 23rd. Well, I will sit there probably for 2 hours on any given day when I have time in commute hours between 2:30 and 4:30 or so, and I will probably issue anywhere between 10 and 12 citations. To answer the question specifically about why we don't sit at four-way stop signs, we actually do. The problem is there are so many four-way stop signs in the city, we don't have enough officers to do that. So a lot of these areas which cause the most, cause the most issues or have the most issues in terms of traffic are areas which I try to get the patrol officers involved in terms of enforcing it as well, and not just relying on the 3 or 4 officers that work in traffic, because we have to kind of have a shared responsibility here with some of the issues, or a lot of the traffic issues. I wish we could post somebody on every single street and limit all the accidents we have for people not stopping at stop signs. I know there's one in here, I think, for 18th and Lincoln, or 20th and Lincoln. I responded to that intersection for that crash, and it was a pretty hellacious crash. Luckily, the person wasn't severely injured, but it's not even a staffing issue. We can't be everywhere at once, unfortunately, but we do pick certain areas at certain times of the day, which we have the higher chance or higher history of having accidents. So it's just a matter of rotating it and trying to hit as many places as we can on a weekly, a monthly, or biannually basis.
Thank you. And just so you know, we've got a lot of concerns about area where they're speeding. Christina talked about speeding on Carlson. There was Zoe that talked about speeding on 22nd and Gaynor, and potentially installing speed bumps or a barrier. There was also questions about speeding on Solano from Highway 80 to San Pablo Avenue. And also drivers ignoring stop signs at 18th and Lincoln. That came from Kathleen, right, saying that the driver was T-boned in that particular area. So are you all aware of those areas, and what are you going to do to address them?
So Carlson, we are fully aware of. The Solano area, yes, obviously Barrett, like I said, between the Avenue and 23rd. What we basically have to do and what we do is it's just boots to the ground, and we work radar a lot or LiDAR, and try to be as visible as possible. In areas that we can't be, we actually have plans next week. I won't be around, but we have plans next week to actually post some of those, like I said, those electronic signs. Oh, did I just go dark? No, good. Those electronic signs that will basically tell people that you need to slow down, and post what the speed limit is, and then have it flashing when people start going a certain amount of miles per hour above the actual speed limit. So we are aware of it. We are working on it. It is a work in progress, and I know it's frustrating. I know that I lived in some of these areas or these intersections where, you know, people were going through the red lights for the stop signs. I'd be frustrated and I want something done. It's not falling upon deaf ears. I want that to be known. It just is a work in progress for us, and we are trying to get out there as much as we possibly can.
Thank you. And similarly, we have a couple of questions I'm just going to group together about donuts and sideshows and how we respond. One comes from Joseph about donuts and sideshow activity. The other one comes from Everest about speeding, loud exhaust, drag racing, donuts. Donuts have come up over again. Again, excessive speed and donuts. On Barrett Avenue comes from Ken Stonebreaker, who I know Ken's on the call. Really need to get a handle of these problems. So just so you know, we've given all these to traffic, so they are aware of these now. How do you guys handle donuts and sideshows and where people are doing these things at tremendous speeds? Because a lot of times people call in and say, well, I see them do it. I call the police. By the time the police get there, they're gone. You know, is it worth it for me to call?
It's definitely worth for people to call. So how we as a police department respond to calls, we have what are called priority calls. They're anywhere from a 1 down to a 5. Priority 1 are going to be like the most serious kind of a calls, you know, shootings, stabbings, like active violence, like violence which is actually happening right then and there. Priority 2 is going to be something where it's probably going to be a sideshow, donuts or something like that, and like a suspicious car might be like a priority 3, and like a cold report is like a priority 5 or 4. So calling, and sometimes if we don't get there in a timely manner, and this is just as patrol, this isn't just traffic, this is just us in a nutshell as patrol officers. Sometimes there's something which is pressing and we have to be somewhere else. I tell people to continue to call because we do show up and we do see these cars actually you know, acting in this reckless manner. So the issue it comes with this is sometimes we try to do a traffic stop on this person, and this individual in this vehicle decides that they don't want to stop. Well, we need to start weighing and kind of getting what are the pros and cons if we're actually going to initiate some sort of a pursuit, try to catch up, try to stop this person. What are the pros in terms of stopping this person, and what are the cons in trying to stop this person? Well, the pros are we can potentially stop them from actually doing this again. If they're doing this kind of behavior, their car can be impounded or towed and impounded for 30 days. If they don't stop and a pursuit, you know, ensues, well, then we're kind of putting the community at risk for ultimately what? For someone spinning donuts. Yes, it can be dangerous and, you know, just bad for people, you know, in terms of getting hurt, but kind of where do we weigh these things? So if people are able to get us license plates and a cell phone video, if they see these cars doing that, that would be great, because we have, where I'm trying to enact it now, is a lot of agencies, if they get like on social media, or if they're able to with cameras throughout the city, are able to catch these vehicles doing this reckless behavior and get a license plate, they are then writing seizure warrants on the cars. It's basically a search warrant, and they can then go find those cars and impound them for 30 days. So one way to stop it is by taking the person's car. Yes, it's their means potentially for work, you know, livelihood, with kind of weigh that in as well. But the community safety, I kind of think that that's pretty high up there as well. So I kind of circled around and got a little bit off on a tangent. We try to get there as quick as we possibly can. When we get there, we try to do an enforcement action. If that car takes off, we're probably not going to pursue it just because it's going to cause unneeded or unjust, risk to the public. But if we're able to get any information on that car, there's actions that we can take afterwards where we can kind of rectify the problem, and hopefully there's some corrective behavior as a result. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Well, that's a big question people ask a lot of times is, what do you do? And I think, obviously stay safe. We're not asking anybody to put themselves at harm's way, but
Correct.
If you are able to get a plate number, if you are able at a safe distance to get some video that you can send in, that's very valuable, because, it can help us to be able to identify the car. If somebody's, doing donuts or doing something at high speed, they're more likely to speed off when a cop car comes. I mean, that's just the reality. And the question is, when we do these speeds through, high speed chases through neighborhoods, which we don't do per our policy, it can endanger people if we're chasing somebody and it's not a homicide suspect or something like that.
Correct.
So I think that's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go and start to take some questions from the chat because I see that they're there. I see that there's another one from Jaime. Jaime, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
As I said, this is a question about yield sign. I don't know if that's really a police issue or there. Do you want me to go into it or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what is it?
Okay, so the Marina Park parking lot actually got very, probably 20 yards from the police department, has two exits. One is very near Regatta, and there's a yield sign. And then there's another one in the intersection of Melville Square and Esplanade Drive, where there is no yield sign. And there's a 90-degree turn, so there's very little visibility. And a couple of times I've been near an accident because you actually have to watch, you have to go very slow and watch to your left where people might be coming from the parking lot, and to your right where people are coming from Esplanade Drive. So I wanted to suggest to put a yield sign there. So, because the drivers that are coming out of the parking lot can see you coming from Regatta, but you cannot see, if you're driving from Regatta, you cannot see the traffic coming from Lara's and Salute, where Salute used to be. You see, I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
Yeah, I think I know where you're speaking of. So in terms of yield signs, that's also something that the city engineering is going to have to go ahead and take part of. As I had said, I recommend, and I can, Mandy, if you wanted to, put my to voicemail. Mandy, if you wanted to let them know what the engineering email is, it's engineering@ci.richmond.ca.us. That's what the city's engineering email is. And they always welcome emails, suggestions, concerns. And they, they kind of look at them, they ask us, and we'll recommend. I mean, they're kind of going to be changing potentially, I think, Barrett a little bit, or they already did, but they're going to be changing 13th Street and Rumrold to, I think, a 2-lane road each way. They kind of came to us and asked what our suggestions were. So we have an input in it. So anywhere where there's like a blind intersection where people can't see, obviously treat it as a yield sign, but some people don't understand that. So having a sign there to remind people is never a bad thing. But thank you.
Thank you for that question. And then LaTanya has a question. LaTanya, would you like to ask your question on air? LaTanya?
Oh, hi. So it wasn't really like a question. It was just more of about the abandoned vehicles that's on Garrity and them, Garrity Way, and then them leaving their trash behind and their trash in the abandoned Chevys outside of the fence now that they put a fence up.
Okay, so if there's abandoned cars, my suggestion is to, once again, call that abandoned vehicle hotline and just let us know where they are and try to give us a license plate and or a description of the car. All too often we get a phone call or on the app an email, and it's sent where it basically says, hey, there's an abandoned car parked on Garrity or Bloom or Close, with zero description. If we get information like that, it's kind of hard for us to act, because we can look and we can see, and there might be 10 cars, some may be abandoned, some not. I mean, if they're obviously abandoned, dilapidated, a hazard, no tires, no engine, no doors, broken windows, things like that, those are things that we can tow right then and there, because it's an actual hazard. But if it's up on that, on that roadway, and just shoot us a call on that voicemail. And I believe Mandy sent my email as well. If people want to send me emails, if there's something which is kind of a pressing matter, feel free to send me an email. I mean, I check my emails on my off time. I respond to emails on off time. It doesn't mean it's going to get resolved right then and there, but you'll at least get an acknowledgement that, hey, I got it. We're working on it. I can't say it'll be done in the first day or two, but we'll get it done as time permits, and when we can. So yeah, see, there's Mandy sending the email out for like the 18th time. But yeah, feel free to call that number or send me an email, and we'll get it handled as quickly as we can for you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those of you all have access to chat, the information for engineering, for the traffic unit, for Sergeant Decious' email, for the abandoned vehicle hotline, it's all in the chat. But everybody who registered, we can put that information in when we send the recording of this out, so you guys can have that and share it with your neighbors, and you can have access to that if you want it all in one place as well. But feel free to jot it down from the chat if you have access to that. I see an iPhone with the hand raised, so I'm just going to go ahead, and I don't know who it is, but I'll call on that person. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, I think that's me. I have a question about cars that have been parked blocking sidewalks in the Northeast neighborhood forever. There's a lot of people who walk in this neighborhood. They walk their dogs. There's older people, and there's also actually young parents with babies in strollers or on their scooters. And I'm just concerned that they never seem to get ticketed, even though it's a hazard.
So that is something that we can do a better job at. I won't sit here and try to sugarcoat it. That is something that we should be better at. We kind of got away a little bit from it over the past 6 months or so, just because not as many people are going to work and there are more people at home. And to be honest, as everyone knows, some of the parking in Richmond is extremely problematic and it's difficult. A lot of driveways have a very difficult time fitting one car, and some of the garages might fit a car, and some people may have 2 or 3 cars for residents. Not saying that that's an excuse, but that is something that starting now, hopefully, we'll be better at doing. On the flip side, just with the amount of now parking people we have, it's 3. It is going to be difficult, but with the actual traffic officers, just when they're in or about their daily routine and stuff, if they see it, they have been directed to at least issue warnings, and if it becomes a habitual problem, that we're going to give citations as well. That is one complaint that I get quite often, and it's throughout the entire city is, so kids on bikes, children's in strollers, and elderly. You don't want to have them walk around into the street where there's a possibility of then a vehicle accident involving, pedestrians. So that is something we can do better, and I intend to. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a big issue that comes up over and over again. I hear a lot of people concerned about, cars blocking the sidewalk, moms with strollers, people in wheelchairs, accessibility issues. I know, we obviously have limited staff, but I also know that, the parking enforcement unit, and traffic unit in general has worked to try to address this. And for those of you who weren't able to participate, I believe not last month, but the month before last, we had Amanda Legault from Parking Enforcement who talked a little bit about that. So it might be worth, if you have time, going back and taking a look at her response to some of that. But if you have locations, you can also send it to PD Parking Enforcement. I think it's in the chat, that you feel like need to be enforced, to let us know where some of those areas are. It's not that, people don't care, but it's just trying to have enough staff to be proactive where you can go out and try to spot these things. I know there's days that they go out and do this, but it helps also with the community if you know of an area that's a hot spot to let us know. And Mandy, thank you for putting that PD parking enforcement email in the chat.
And the same thing goes for cars that are double parked, where you have cars that are parallel parked on each side of the roadway, and then you have someone that decides to park next to it, halfway blocking the street. I mean, that for me, that's one of my pet peeves, and that's something which when I see it, I enforce. I try to find out whose car it is. And honestly, there's a lot of times where I've actually towed the car because it creates more of a hazard, because now vehicles need to go around that car into oncoming traffic. And then what do we have the chance of? A head-on collision. So it's the same thing with blocking the sidewalks. You know, you have people that are double parking, and it's causing just as much, if not more, of a hazard. So.
There also was a question, or, you know, people brought up the question, and maybe you can respond to this, about investigating traffic collisions. So we've had a few very serious, fatal kind of traffic collisions that have happened in the city in the last couple of months. Do you guys want to talk about what the role of the traffic unit is in that, and why it is important for us to, you know, deal with DUI enforcement?
So the most recent one we had, so what does the traffic unit do also? So I said at the beginning, it's when someone is seriously injured. I don't think I said, or if they get killed or if they die, but that is also one of our main functions. So it's just like a homicide. I mean, it's unfortunately, but it's just a different way of someone passing. So we are the homicide detectives when it comes to traffic. So we kind of speak for, you know, the person which was killed, whether unfortunately they were the one who was technically at fault, or if the driver was. So one incident we had, I remember because it was on my birthday back in August, was I know a gentleman had gone across the street and ended up getting hit, ended up perishing. So what do? We try to canvass the area. We try to get as much community engagement as we possibly can, and try to get people to tell us if they know, you know, who was driving the car, because we are still looking for leads on, you know, this actual incident. That we don't think was DUI related, but in terms of DUIs, a lot of our crashes are DUI related. And if you look at the stats in terms of who's injured, you know, throughout the state of California or throughout the country in terms of in DUI crashes, the number is ginormous. It is absolutely enormous. And that's something which is extremely preventable, right? So I go back to talking about and speaking of this OTS grant that we have. It's the Office of Traffic Safety, where we are awarded, we apply for, and we get a grant so we can work additional hours to do the actual enforcement of DUI or alcohol related operations. We do it for the main purpose of actually someone's trying to get in my office. Okay. We do that for the community's safety, right? We do it because we're trying to ensure that, you know, the community is safe, and that we're taking these people that are drinking off the road, you know, as quickly as possible and in a manner which is safe. So talking about and doing these DUI checkpoints, that's a manner in which we can do it where there's no car stops, where there's no chance of actually crashing and things like that. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I hope that answers the question, kind of, Michelle.
Thank you. And I was in the chat just trying to answer Jaime's question. Mandy, maybe you can help me post the link for our KCRT and for how these recordings are shared. So the reason we record this and share this is we know not everybody is able to get on live. So we share this, we post it to our website at the PD, and we also post it to KCRT, which is the city's television station. So they broadcast the city council meetings and all kinds of things that you can find information for. If you want to sign up for our distribution list, like, so if you want to know kind of what's going on with RPD community at richmondpd.net, I put it in the chat. and we can send it out to everybody who registered, and feel free to sign up, and then you'll get more information on this. I think we have time for one more question, so I'm going to go with Carla.
Hi there. Question, I know that I think about 2-3 years ago, we did a campaign for the double parking on the street, covering the sidewalks. Maybe that's something that we need to revisit, do another campaign on that.
Sergeant
Oh,
Decious,
sorry, I got muted. I'm sorry.
no problem.
You
I'm
muted
sorry.
me?
No, I muted myself. I'm sorry. Could you re-ask that? I didn't
Right.
quite understand.
So about 3 years ago, the police department did a campaign on the parking on the sidewalk. We distributed flyers, and I know that we had some officers out there issuing tickets and stuff. Maybe we need to revisit
okay.
that.
Yeah, that would be something that, I mean, for us, even like whether it be specifically us, or if we have days where we have 2 teams that are working, get half of a team to go out there and actually, go to those areas. I mean, what I would say is, just as long as we know what the areas are obviously ahead of time, if we get the information from the community as the areas which are most affected, yeah, we could do something like that. It could even be part of, because we do pound the beat in the community and things like that. It'd be something like, and I wouldn't say going out and obviously doing the tickets right then and there, but more or less, hey, we're going to be coming out and doing this more often. We're going to give you kind of a, an actual warning. I mean, some people should know they shouldn't be parking on that sidewalk. Some people may or may not understand that or know it, but that's something we could possibly do. I'll definitely make a note of that. I actually wasn't part of that campaign, so I wasn't really aware of it.
I know.
I'm sorry. I actually
No worries. It's great to see you.
I was actually speaking. I was like, what? Wait a second. And I was like, oh, so I apologize.
It's all right.
And good to see you as well.
Thank you, Carla. So I think we've come to the end of the questions that we can answer for today. So hopefully we got a lot of your questions answered. If there were any burning questions that we weren't able to get to, feel free to hit us up at our rpdcommunity@richmondpd.net. And, we will try to answer those questions for you that, we weren't able to answer. But I just really want to thank Sergeant Decious for taking out his time to do this, and I want to thank Carla and Al and Julie and the Crime Prevention Executive Board that's online, for working with us and encouraging us and being flexible about, during the pandemic, trying to do this thing online. And people have been pretty interested in it. So it's been a learning lesson and a good experience, and hopefully it's valuable to you. Before we go, I wanted to give Crime Prevention Board, I don't know, Al or Carla, you wanted to share anything with folks about National Night Out before we close out?
Thank you. So we are doing our virtual National Night Out due to the pandemic. Something totally different. We're really excited. It's going to be October 3rd at 4:00. So if you can sign yourself up, I believe there's a link. Mandy might be able to put that on the chat box. We would greatly appreciate it. It's the once-a-year event that we all look forward to, and usually we caravan through the streets. We're not able to do that, but we're going to do some community shout-outs and some entertainment. So we look forward to everybody participating.
Thank you. And anybody can participate in the National Night Out. We have neighborhoods that are already lined up for the community shout outs, but we just encourage everybody to get online. You can dress up, you can dress down. It's a nice thing about pandemic. You can roll out of bed and have your PJs on, or you can dress to the nines. It really doesn't matter. But it's just a way for us to see each other, since I know as neighbors, we've been kind of separated. And so we love seeing everybody's wonderful faces, and hopefully we will get through this time so that we can connect again in person. But with that, I wanted to thank everybody for being a part of the roundtable today. And thank you to Mandy for the great work in the chat, for fielding all those links and posting them there. If you signed up and you registered, which is why we encourage you to register, we'll send all those links to you. And we ended exactly on time, guys, at 5 o'clock. So Captain Wyatt, I don't know if you had any last words. If not, we will close out.
Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care, guys.
Have a great one.